sitting with my son and daughter-in-law under the warm lights, I put down my fork and asked, "Jackson, did the hospital send the letter and the medical fund I set up for you? Did you use it?" He hesitated, then admitted, "I used it for my wife's birthday party." $200,000 saved for his health turned into a luxury celebration for her. The whole room fell heavy, a sharp sting of betrayal tightening in my chest. I stood up, my voice turning cold. "One day you'll regret what you've done. How's your own Christmas season going? Comment your location and the time right now." "My name is Griffin, and this happened on Christmas Eve last year. You know that feeling when everything looks perfect on the surface. When you've got the tree lit up, the smell of roasted turkey filling every corner of the house, and your family sitting around the table like something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. That's what I had. That's what I thought I had anyway. The dining room glowed with those warm Christmas lights, the kind that turn everything golden, even the wrinkles on your face. Garland twisted around the banister, candles flickering in the center of the table, casting long shadows across the food, wrapped presents stacked in the corner, some bigger than others, all waiting for tomorrow morning. Jackson was there, my son, 27 years old, grinning like he didn't have a care in the world, and Chloe, his wife, both of them laughing at something one of them had just said. I'd been quiet most of dinner. Not the usual kind of quiet, the kind where you're just listening, enjoying the moment. This was different. This was the kind of quiet where something's eating at you, but you're trying to push it down. I set down my fork. The clinking sound made Jackson look up from his plate. "Jackson," I said, keeping my voice steady, "did the hospital send that letter? The one about your appointment?" He smiled, chewed his turkey, completely unbothered. "Yeah, Dad. Got it last week." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my face flat. "And the fund, the medical fund, I set up. Have you used any of that yet to start preparing?" That's when his face shifted. Not guilty exactly. More like caught off guard. He glanced at Chloe. She didn't look at him. She was focused on her mashed potatoes like they held the secrets of the universe. "Yeah, actually," Jackson said. The words came out too fast. "About that, Dad. I used it." The room didn't just go quiet. It died. The conversation stopped. The clinking of forks and knives stopped. Everything stopped. "You used it?" I repeated the words like I was tasting something rotten. "I did, yeah. I took it out last week." Jackson's voice had lost that casual confidence. Now he sounded like he was explaining something he'd rehearsed. "We did that thing for Chloe, you know, her birthday party. The big one she wanted at the resort downtown. I told her I'd make it special, and I kind of promised her I'd use that money." I could feel the blood moving in my chest, slow, heavy. "It was $200,000, Jackson. I know, Dad, I know." He was talking faster now, his words stumbling over each other. "But I promised her I'd pay it back. I swear to God, I'm making good money right now. Give me a few months, and I'll replace every single penny. I'm serious." I didn't say anything for a long moment. I just looked at him. At Chloe, who still wasn't looking back. At the Christmas tree in the living room, visible from where we sat, those perfect golden lights still twinkling, like nothing had changed. Then I stood up. "One day, Jackson," I said quietly. My voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere deep and dark. "One day you're going to regret what you did. One day, real soon, you're going to understand exactly how much you've lost." I left my napkin on the plate, walked past the tree, past the presents, and I left them sitting there at that perfect Christmas table, wondering what the hell that meant. I didn't know it then, but that dinner, that one sentence had already changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark of our living room watching the Christmas tree lights flicker. On off, like a heartbeat that wouldn't quit. Jackson and Chloe had left hours ago. I was alone with nothing but my thoughts. But my mind wouldn't shut down. It kept pulling me backward. 3 months. That's all it took. 3 months earlier, Jackson had called me at work. "Hey, Dad, I'm not feeling great. Feels like the flu." I'd thought nothing of it. But when I got home and saw him on the couch, I knew it was worse. He was pale, moving slowly, like his body was running on half speed. "You should go get checked," I'd told him. He didn't argue. That's when I knew something was really wrong. The hospital was cold. Fluorescent lights, humming. That bleach smell. Jackson sat in the waiting room while they drew his blood, did the tests. I could see the fear in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he thought I wasn't looking. The nurse called me back alone. Not Jackson, just me. Dr. Paul Mitchell's office was small. He didn't smile. "Your son has chronic kidney disease," he said. "Stage 4. The words didn't make sense at first. What does that mean? My voice sounded distant. His kidneys are functioning at about 15 to 20%. Normal is 100. If we don't act soon, complete kidney failure. Either a transplant or dialysis for the rest of his life. 3 times a week, 4 hours each time. I felt something shift inside my chest. There's a window, Dr. Mitchell said. If we start preparation now, if we get a transplant lined up within 6 to 8 months, we've got an 80% success rate. But after that window closes. He didn't need to finish. How much does a transplant cost? $200,000 to $400,000. That's just the first year. Anti-rejection medication runs another $100,000 to $150,000 annually. $200,000 to $400,000. I remember nodding like I was processing, but I was drowning. Does he know? I asked. No. Your son needs to know, but these conversations need to be handled carefully. He's young. He's going to be scared. He needs a parent who has a plan. I left that office in a fog, sat in my car for what felt like hours. The steering wheel was cold under my hands. That's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to tell Jackson, not yet. What good would panic do? My son was already scared without even knowing it. What he needed was a father with control. What he needed was for me to handle it. So I did what I've always done. I handled it. Quietly. Completely. When Dr. Paul Mitchell walked me out of his office that afternoon, the weight of his words hung between us like a terrible secret. Stage 4. If Jackson didn't get a transplant within the next 6 to 8 months, he'd be on dialysis for the rest of his life. $200,000 minimum, maybe more. The thought nearly crushed me right there in the hallway. But I kept my face steady. I thanked the doctor, shook his hand, and drove away like a man who'd just received a routine checkup. Jackson didn't need to know. Not yet. Not like this. My son had always been a worrier. He inherited that from his mother. If I told him he was sick, really sick, his mind would spiral into worst-case scenarios. He'd spiral into fear, and I'd lose him to that fear long before the illness could touch him. No, I would handle this, alone, the way I'd handled everything else since his mother passed. The drive home took 40 minutes. I remember every second of it. When I arrived, I went straight to my home office and closed the door. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose that mattered. I opened my laptop and created a new email account, something separate, something Jackson would never find. Then I called my bank. I'd like to set up a new savings account, I told the representative. Yes, I know I already have one with you. This is different. This one is for a specific goal. Certainly, sir. What would you like to name the account? I paused. For just a moment, I let myself say it out loud, silently inside my head. Jackson's Kidney Transplant Fund. Let's just call it Medical Fund, I said instead. Over the next 3 months, that account became my obsession. Every paycheck, I calculated. What if I took an extra $200 a week? What about those retirement bonuses I'd been saving? The tax refund coming in April, I made a spreadsheet, something I'd never done. Before tracking every dollar, every transaction. $5,000, then $10,000, then $25,000. I started picking up extra shifts at work, weekends, evenings. My colleagues didn't ask questions. They just assumed I was finally taking on that promotion I'd always turned down. I told no one the truth. Every deposit felt like an act of love wrapped in secrecy. Every number on that screen represented a possibility, a future where my son wouldn't spend his best years tethered to a dialysis machine. It represented my promise, I will not let this happen to you. I will fix this. By September, the account held exactly $200,000. I remember staring at that number for 20 minutes. Was it enough? Would it cover the surgery, the hospital, stay, the medications he'd need for the rest of his life? According to everything I'd read, transplant costs ranged wildly, anywhere from $200, Saka zero to $400,000, when you included the lifelong immunosuppressant drugs. I had enough for the beginning, for the hope of it. For now, that would have to be enough. I never told Jackson any of this. I never hinted, never slipped up. I came home from work each day and sat with him, watched him laugh at TV shows with Chloe, asked him how he was feeling, all the while knowing something about his body that he didn't know about himself. The secret was a third person in every room we shared, invisible, unbearable, necessary. Every night I'd check that account balance on my phone before going to bed. $200,000, waiting, watching, ready. I didn't know that Chloe had seen the bank statements. I didn't know she'd been looking through Jackson's things searching. I didn't know she was planning. All I knew was that I'd done what a father does. I'd sacrificed. I'd protected. I'd loved in silence. When the sun came up, I was already awake. I hadn't slept. I'd spent the entire night staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, my mind replaying that moment. At the Christmas table, over and over, Jackson's confession, Chloe's indifference, $200,000, gone, just like that. But somewhere around 3 a.m., the anger crystallized into something else, clarity. I understood what I had to do. My phone rang at 9:47 a.m. Jackson. Dad. His voice was uncertain, like he was testing the waters. Why did you leave like that, Mom? I mean, Chloe thinks you were really rude about the whole thing. I didn't answer immediately. Through the window of my kitchen, I could see the bare December trees, the frost on the grass. Everything looked frozen in place. Come over, I said, both of you. Now. 20 minutes later, they were at my door. Jackson looked tired, genuinely exhausted, like he hadn't slept either. Chloe, on the other hand, looked angry. She walked into my living room like she owned it, arms crossed, jaw tight. This is unnecessary, she said before either of us could speak. That money was Jackson's. You gave it to him. What he does with it is his business. I didn't give it to him, I said, my voice steady. It was a medical fund. A medical fund for what? Jackson asked. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, a reason, an explanation, anything that made sense. I looked at my son, and I felt the weight of everything I was about to do. The silence, the secrecy. All of it was about to come crashing down around us. But not yet. Not like this. Not until he was sitting in a courtroom facing the truth head on. It doesn't matter what it was for, I said. What matters is that it wasn't for a birthday party. Chloe laughed, actually laughed. Oh, come on, it's just money. You're acting like we committed a crime. You committed theft, I said flatly. That's not fair. Jackson stood up. Dad, you can't just give someone money and then take it back like this. That's not how family works. No, I agreed. Family doesn't work by lying. Family doesn't work by stealing from someone who's trying to help. And family definitely doesn't work when the people you love don't even know what you're capable of. Chloe stepped forward. You're being insane. This is a reaction. You'll calm down in a few days and realize how ridiculous this is. I've made my decision, I said, and I stood up to meet her height. As of right now, I'm cutting off all financial support. The house, the one I've been letting you live in, Jackson, you need to find somewhere else. The car in the driveway is mine. The credit card I gave you for emergencies canceled. All of it. Jackson's face went pale. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. But where are we supposed to go? What about the mortgage? The insurance? That's not my problem anymore, I said. The words came out cold, but I meant them. Not because I wanted to hurt him, because sometimes hurting is the only way to teach. You're 30 years old. You have a wife. You made a choice. Now you live with it. Chloe grabbed Jackson's arm. Come on, we don't need to listen to this. Jackson looked back at me confused, afraid, searching my face for some sign that I didn't mean what I was saying. I kept my expression hard, unmoved. If I showed him even a crack of sympathy, he might convince himself this was all negotiable. It wasn't. They left without another word. I stood alone in my living room, listening to their car pull out of the driveway. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like it was caving in. I'd just cut my son off. Completely. Totally. But I also knew this was the beginning of the end. A line had been drawn, and on the other side of it, everything was going to change. 3 weeks later, the envelope came. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago when the mailman delivered it. A thick manila envelope, official-looking, with the return address of a law firm I'd never heard of, Grant & Associates. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The letter inside was formal, precise, devastating. Petition for guardianship of estate. Jackson and Chloe, represented by attorney Lawrence Grant, were filing to have me declared mentally unstable and incapable of managing finances. They claimed I'd threatened Jackson caused him significant emotional distress, and was acting erratically by cutting off support without cause or warning. The petition also stated, and this part made me set the letter down and breathe slowly, that I should be required to return all funds I'd transferred with interest, and submit to a psychiatric evaluation to determine my fitness as a parent and guardian. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. For a long moment, I just sat there. The kitchen was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised, really. This was exactly the kind of thing Chloe would do: escalate, weaponize, destroy. Jackson was just along for the ride, too confused to see what was really happening, but knowing it didn't make it hurt any less. I picked up my phone and called Christopher Ward, the lawyer I'd hired after that first night of insomnia. I'd found him through a referral, and in our single consultation, he'd struck me as sharp, strategic, and most importantly, someone who believed me. "Christopher, it's Griffin," I said. The papers came. There was a pause on the other end. "The guardianship petition?" "Yes." "Can you read me the key allegations?" I did. When I finished, Christopher let out a low whistle. "This is serious," he said. "They're not playing around. They're going for full estate control, which means they believe they can make a case that you're a threat to Jackson's well-being and financial security." "Can they?" I asked. "Can they make a case?" "Sure." "Can they win?" "No. Not if we're smart about this." He paused. "Do you have evidence, documentation of the medical fund hospital records?" "Everything," I said. "Bank statements, medical records from Dr. Mitchell, the full diagnosis. I have it all." "Good, that's good. That's our foundation." Another pause. "Griffin, I'm going to be honest with you. This trial is going to be public. Everything is going to come out. Jackson will learn about his diagnosis in a courtroom in front of a judge, possibly in front of Chloe's family. There's no way around it." I closed my eyes. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it said out loud made it real. "I know," I said. That's actually okay. He needs to know." "You're sure? Because once we open that door, there's no closing it." "I'm sure." Christopher exhaled. "All right. Here's what I need from you. Get me everything. Hospital records. The full diagnostic report. Every bank statement related to that medical fund, receipts, correspondence, everything. We need to build an ironclad timeline showing that your actions were not erratic or threatening, but protective and strategic." Over the next week, I gathered the documentation like a man possessed. I organized medical records, chronologically color-coded bank statements, compiled a detailed timeline of Jackson's condition and my response to it. I created a narrative in spreadsheets and documents, a story told in numbers and medical jargon that proved one simple truth: I had tried to save my son's life. And in doing so, I had made enemies of the people he loved most. Sitting at my desk late one night, surrounded by papers, I realized something had shifted inside me. The silence was over. The secret was about to become public testimony. Jackson would finally understand why his father had cut him off. He would finally understand what his wife had done. He would finally understand that love sometimes means letting the person you cherish face the consequences of their choices. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. The courtroom was cold, not just in temperature, but in atmosphere, that particular kind of chill that only comes with formality, consequence, and truth about to break open. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded in front of me, watching Judge Diana Fletcher enter and take her seat. She was a woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes that seemed to see through every pretense in the room. That was good. I needed her to see the truth. Jackson sat across from me with Chloe at his side. Lawrence Grant, their attorney, was a thin man with slick back hair and the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He stood as the judge settled in. "Your Honor," Grant began, his voice smooth and rehearsed, "we're here today because the defendant has acted with gross negligence and emotional abuse. He's cut off financial support to his son without cause, without warning, causing severe emotional distress. We have testimony from—" "Objection!" Christopher Ward, my attorney, said quietly from beside me. "Hearsay." Judge Fletcher nodded slightly. "Sustained. Mr. Grant, present your evidence." Grant proceeded to lay out his case. I was erratic, unstable, possibly mentally ill. I'd threatened Jackson. I'd abandoned him. The petition was about protecting Jackson from a father who'd lost control. The words hung in the courtroom air like poison. When Grant finally sat down, Judge Fletcher turned to me. "Mr. Griffin, would you like to respond?" I stood. My legs were steady. My voice was steady. 3 months of secrecy, 3 months of carrying this weight alone had led to this single moment. "Jackson has stage 4 chronic kidney disease," I said. The courtroom shifted. I heard Chloe inhale sharply. "According to Dr. Paul Mitchell, his nephrologist, Jackson's kidney function is critically compromised. Without a transplant within the next 6 to 8 months, he will be on dialysis for the rest of his life. That's $90,000 per year for the rest of his life." I walked to the evidence table where Christopher had arranged the documents. I created a medical fund. I continued picking up the bank statements. $200,000. I worked overtime. I liquidated savings. I did everything I could to save my son's life. And yes, I did it in secret because I knew if I told him he would spend that time worrying instead of living. Jackson spent that entire fund on his wife's birthday party at a resort. $200,000. Gone. The courtroom was utterly silent. When I realized the money was gone, I cut off support. Not out of anger, out of desperation. Because I was trying to save his life, and he was throwing away his salvation for a party. Judge Fletcher leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, fixed on me. Do you have documentation of this medical fund and Jackson's diagnosis? Yes, Your Honor. Christopher brought forward the hospital records, complete diagnostic reports from Dr. Paul Mitchell, blood work results, kidney function tests, all stamped with official seals and dates. Medical records don't lie. Judge Fletcher examined them carefully, then looked up. Jackson, she said, her voice carrying the weight of a judge who just realized everything had been turned upside down. Did you know you have stage 4 chronic kidney disease? Jackson's face had gone completely white. His mouth opened and closed without sound. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. No, my father he never told me. Were you aware that your father had created a medical fund for you? No. Judge Fletcher turned to Chloe. Ms. Chloe, did you know? Chloe's jaw clenched. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. Ms. Chloe, the judge repeated, her voice harder now. Did you know about Jackson's medical condition? Chloe's voice cracked. I found some documents from the hospital. I wasn't sure what they meant at first, but yes, I knew. The courtroom erupted. Whispers gasped, the sound of feet shifting. A court officer called for order. Jackson looked at Chloe like he'd never seen her before. Then he looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes the moment realization hit. The moment he understood what his wife had done. What his father had been trying to do. He looked devastated. Your Honor, I said I have bank statements showing every withdrawal. Receipts from the resort where the birthday party was held. I have everything you need to see what happened here. Judge Fletcher's expression had hardened into something resolute. Jackson still couldn't speak. He just sat there, a grown man confronted with the fact that his father had been trying to save his life, and his wife had stolen from him to fund her luxury weekend. The truth, I realized, was far more brutal than any lie. Judge Diana Fletcher didn't hesitate. She sat back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her, and read the verdict with the kind of calm precision that only comes from someone who's seen the full truth and knows exactly what justice looks like. After reviewing all evidence presented, she began, It is clear that the defendant, Mr. Griffin, has acted in his son's best interest. He is not mentally unstable. He is not abusive. He is a father attempting to save his son's life. She paused, letting that sink in. The petition for guardianship of estate is denied with prejudice. The defendant is exonerated of all charges. Furthermore, and here her voice hardened, the petitioners are ordered to repay the full $200,000 plus accrued interest to the defendant within 30 days. I am also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation into financial fraud. The gavel came down. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of victory. It was the sound of everything I'd been fighting for finally becoming real. Jackson's face had gone completely ashen. Chloe was crying, her shoulders shaking. Lawrence Grant looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I didn't smile. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. 3 months later, I watched my son's life collapse in slow motion. The dialysis center smelled like antiseptic and resignation. Jackson was there 3 times a week, 4 hours at a time, his blood being filtered through a machine, because his kidneys could no longer do the job. He was 27 years old, and he looked 40. The golden window, those 6 to 8 months the doctor had mentioned, had closed. We'd missed it by 3 months and a birthday party. Now Jackson would be tethered to this place, to this machine, for the rest of his life. $90,000 a year forever, just to stay alive. He couldn't work consistently. The dialysis sessions left him exhausted, anemic, depressed. His job let him go within 2 months. He'd tried to find other work, but what employer wants someone who needs to disappear for 4 hours 3 times a week? Chloe lasted exactly 4 months after the trial. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd left him, couldn't handle it apparently, couldn't watch him suffer, couldn't deal with the reality that the man she'd married was now permanently disabled. She divorced him quietly and moved back to her parents' house. In the settlement, she got half of what remained, which wasn't much after the restitution to me and the legal fees. Jackson was left with nothing but a disease that would never end. I'd won the trial. I'd won the judgment. The court had ordered restitution. The district attorney's office was investigating. On paper, I'd won completely. But sitting in my lawyer's office 6 months after the verdict, looking at the settlement check for $200,000 plus interest, I felt like I'd lost everything. I sold my house. I'd been thinking about it for a while, and suddenly it felt necessary. This house held too many memories of Jackson as a child of his mother, of all the years when things were different. I sold it for the equity, liquidated my retirement accounts, and started planning my exit. I told no one where I was going, not yet. I just knew I couldn't stay in this town, in this state, watching my son waste away on machines, knowing that I'd won a legal battle, but lost the actual war, the war to save him from his own choices. The irony was brutal. I'd spent months secretly protecting him, and when I finally revealed the truth, it came too late. The golden window had closed. The damage was done. Justice had been served, and it tasted like ash. Jackson never called me. Not once after the trial. I think part of him hated me for forcing him to face what his wife had done, for exposing the lie he'd been living. I think part of him also understood that I'd tried to save him and he'd thrown it away. Either way, the distance between us was now infinite. I stood in the empty living room of my house on the day before closing, and I realized something that no court victory could change. Some battles aren't won in courtrooms. Some losses can't be recovered by judges or settlements or restitution. Some fathers try to protect their sons, and sometimes that protection comes too late. Sometimes the truth destroys everything it touches. I sat at gate 47 watching the morning light spread across the tarmac like a confession I'd already made, but nobody wanted to hear. My suitcase was at my feet. One suitcase. Everything I was taking from the life I'd built, the family I'd tried to save, the battle I'd won and lost, simultaneously fit into a single piece of luggage. I won in court. On paper, it's a victory. But sitting here watching planes take off, I understood something that no courtroom could teach me. Winning isn't always the same thing as winning. Jackson is on dialysis 3 times a week for the rest of his life. That's what my victory cost him. The golden window 6 to 8 months closed because his wife stole from him and he didn't even know he was sick. 3 months. That's all we needed. 3 months to get him a transplant, to give him a future. Chloe left him, divorced him. She couldn't watch him suffer. He's alone now. I think about that Christmas dinner, Jackson's face when I said, "One day you're going to regret this, Jackson." He did regret it, but not the way I meant. He didn't regret spending money. He regretted his entire life. He regretted not knowing he was sick. He regretted trusting his wife. He regretted every moment after because they were all spent hooked up to a machine. And I did that. I thought I was protecting him by keeping silent. I thought I was being strong, being a father who handled things alone. I was so certain that my silence was love. It wasn't. Silence without explanation is just abandonment dressed up in good intentions. If I had told him, if I had sat him down and said, "Jackson, you're sick, but we're going to fix this together," maybe he would have understood. Maybe he would have been careful with that money. Maybe he would have gotten his transplant in time and his life wouldn't be defined by dialysis machines and slow fade. Maybe. But I'll never know because I chose silence over truth. I chose to be the hero of my own story instead of being honest with my son. I won the case. I got my restitution. I proved I was right. And in doing so, I lost the only thing that actually mattered, my son's belief that his father loved him enough to tell him the truth. The gate agent announced boarding. I stood up, picked up my suitcase, and felt the weight of it, not physically, but spiritually. Every choice, every secret, every moment, I thought I was protecting someone, and was actually just protecting myself from hard conversations. I learned something sitting in courtrooms and hospitals and empty houses. Love is not silence. Love is speaking the truth even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because silence is just fear wearing a disguise, and fear destroys more than any truth ever could. I learned that too late. My boarding group was called. I stood in line with the other travelers, each heading somewhere new, each carrying their own weight, their own regrets, their own hard-won lessons that had cost them everything. I walked through the gate, toward the jetway, toward the plane, toward a new city where no one knew Griffin or Jackson or Chloe, or the sound of that gavel coming down. Behind me in this city, my son was probably preparing for another dialysis session. His life had become a calendar of suffering, a schedule of survival. And it was because I loved him too quietly. I should have been louder. I'm Griffin. That's my true story. That's my failure. For years I thought silence was protection. I thought keeping secrets meant keeping my son safe. I was wrong. Dead wrong. And now Jackson spends 3 days a week hooked up to a dialysis machine because I chose to be silent instead of honest. Don't be like me. If you love someone, truly love them. Don't hide the truth. Don't think you're strong enough to carry their burden alone. That's not strength. That's pride wearing a disguise. This true story proves it. The golden window closed. Jackson missed his chance at a transplant because of a birthday party and a father who loved him too quietly. Now he'll spend the rest of his life on machines, watching other people live the life he should have had. God teaches us that love covers a multitude of sins, but silence covers nothing. Silence destroys. Silence kills hope. Silence transforms protection into abandonment. My lesson from this true story love is speaking the truth. Love is having the hard conversation. Love is being vulnerable enough to say, I need your help. I'm scared. Here's what's happening. Love is trusting the people you care about with your real pain, not just your curated strength. I won my court case. I proved I was right, and I lost my son. That's the trade. That's the cost of silence. This is a true story about a Grandpa Stories moment when Grandpa Stories teach us what not to do. My regret is your lesson. Share this Grandpa Stories content. Tell someone you love the truth you've been hiding. Have the conversation you've been avoiding. Don't wait until it's too late like I did. Comment below. What truth have you been keeping silent about? This is your sign to speak up. Like, share, and subscribe to the Subtle channel for more Grandpa Stories and true story content that teaches hard lessons about love, family, and the cost of silence. Because sometimes the loudest thing we can do is finally speak.